We saw some of these terms before, but I want to run through them again. Just kind of as we're wrapping up the poetry section here, I just wanted to run over some stuff here. So we've got, for meaning, denotation. This is the direct meaning of a word or expression. It's the explicit and literal meaning of the word, the one you'd look up in a dictionary, for example. And then we've got connotation. This is the indirect meaning of a word, what might be implied. So think about the difference between these words. If I say house or home, a house would be the physical building. I'm going back to the house. I'm going home. You go home for the holidays, maybe. Maybe you go home for the summer. Maybe you go home. It's just got, I need some home improvements. They both can be used for house. But home has different connotations, more warm. House, more of the building structure. Expensive and pricey. Yeah, that's an expensive car. That's a pricey car. So the second one would connote that probably out of your budget. Slender, thin, and skinny. These are all different words that mean the same thing, but it's very skinny. What does that connote as opposed to thin or slender? They all mean pretty much the same thing, but the connotations are all different. Let's take a look here at an example of this in a poem. This is a poem by Gustavo Adolfo Bécquer, Rima 7, Rhyme 7. So this is just the first part of the poem, but I wanted to take a look here. In the dark corner of the room, perhaps forgotten by its owner, silent and covered with dust, one can see a harp. How many notes sleep in its chords like the bird that sleeps in the branches, waiting for a snowy white hand that can awaken them. So, denotation. Yeah, there's a harp over there in the corner. There it is. So what do you want to do about it? Well, it's just sitting there. But what does it connote? Think about it. All those different connotations. A harp has to do with beauty. It has to do with sound. There's making a connection here between music and poetry. So basically, there's a harp in the corner. All you need to do is get up and play it. And it says here, for snowy white hand that can awaken them. So waken up the senses. Wake up your poetic sensibility and play the harp. Wake up your poetic sensibility and be creative. So there's just a harp in the corner as a denotation, but the connotation has to do with poetry and music and sound and action and creativity. Let's take a look here at symbol. This is when the words represent a concept, relationship, or object. There's some stock symbols out there, easily recognizable, like a rose. A rose is a rose. You got a flag. If you show me like the American flag, for me it would have a different symbol than, for example, someone in a different country. It might, symbolize something else. When I see a Korean flag, for example, that's got a lot of symbols on it, but it doesn't mean the same thing for me as it might for a Korean. A skull, skull and crossbones. The old skull in the iconography, the old subject matter of many of the old paintings, a skull would be, represent death, or skull and crossbones is danger. Maybe the color white. Why do you wear a white wedding dress, for example? Symbolizes purity, etc. So let's check out this level of symbology in this poem called Poetic Art by Vicente Huidobro. Now, this is another poem. You may have to zoom in on this, but I just wanted to get in the whole poem here. This is called Poetic Art. So this is originally written in Spanish. This is an English translation, obviously. But check out the symbology here. Verse is like a key that opens 1,000 doors. A page turns, something takes flight. How many believing eyes look at the hearing soul and the hearing soul remains trembling. So the verse is like a key. Well, opens up a lot of possibilities. Remember at the very beginning of this section I said, why do people write poetry? And, this is part of that inspiration. Now the second stanza here says, invent new words and care for their word. The adjective, when it does not give life, kills. What that means is, adjective, if you don't use words correctly, you can overuse them, and when it does not give life, it kills. It becomes too much. The words, if they're not used properly, do not have the correct function. We are all in a cycle of nerves. The muscle cluster, like I remember in the museums. So, you know, in the museum there's a lot of great art, a lot of great poetry has been written. We don't want to compete with that. That's already done. The true vigor resides in the mind. So now he's saying here that with a key we can open our mind. So we don't need to imitate things. As he says here, why do you the rose, O poet? It will flourish in the poem. It's saying here that why do you recreate the rose? You should just why do you recreate a rose that's already there? Why don't you make your own rose? So here we've got the symbol of the rose again, the symbol of the key. Only for us live all things under the sun. The poet is a small god. So this whole poem here, you know, it's got a couple of symbols in here. We've got the muscle cluster, which is, you know, it symbolizes all of the great things that have been written. We've got the key here. We've got the rose, etc. And basically, the whole poem here is just saying, you know, the possibilities are limitless. We don't have to, you know, he was a creationist poet, where he thought that, you know, we could create anything we want through poetry, and that the limits were endless. So this is an example of symbol in verse. So when you think about all the three of these terms together, denotation, connotation, and symbol, you know, it's kind of like one step after the other. A lot of the times connotation and symbol might overlap, but let's think about it for the word table, you know. If I take the word table and I look it up in the dictionary, it's going to mean certain things. But if I think about different types of tables, they're going to connote different things. Say I'm in class, I'm at the teacher's desk. That's big. You know, that has a certain connotation. And then you got the students' desks, you know, that would be sitting in a row, the smaller desks. Those would connote something else. So the size of the table, those different tables connote, you know, maybe the center of the classroom. So some teachers, they get rid of that desk and they sit down with the students, for example, in a Harkness table. They all will sit around a table and the teacher will be part of the conversation because they're being a facilitator, because they don't want any desk to connote certain things. A symbol. Say, you know, the word table, you know, it's a symbol of what? It's a symbol of studying. Maybe it's, if you think about, oh, we have to take that to the table. Or maybe a table for you is a place where you sat around with your family and had a lot of conversations at the meal. So, you know, when you sit at the table, you know, that's a conversation we need to have at the table that would symbolize a time when you're all able to sit down and, you know, spend time together and work out your problems. So these are some examples here of different types of meaning.